Something that you could kind of do here is take about 2 steps backwards so that you're not on the steps, but well, you'd be 2 steps backwards from where you are, so you can use the steps as cover. That way you wouldn't have to really move very much here, and you'd have better cover. Alright, here's a little bit of a game sense trick. You know that Hanzo is going to go for, that Genji is going to go for the health back because you get him to low health. So knowing that, you can kind of pre-aim or set up your aim to predict his movement a little bit more. Since he's going to want to take more of a, since his location is something you know, or the location he's trying to get to is something you know. So use that to your benefit. It'll help. You might have landed that shot on him. Nice shot, by the way. Alright, there you had to know that she was going to see you soon. So you could have originally been where you are right now. Use the cover to the wall so that you can safely do damage without even having to put Ash as part of a factor and something you need to respond to immediately. So you didn't really need to be low ground there at that time. Alright, for this and a few other times that you're playing the game, or in the game as I've watched it, I watched a little bit forward in front of this to the second map too, but you could possibly be landing those shots on the Genji and a few of the harder to hit characters that are either at range or just have tiny hit boxes and are difficult to hit either way. And I'm going to suggest that you just spend some time in the aim arena on the Havana map if you go over to custom games, simply so you get more practice against different strafing patterns and movement patterns of like Genjis or jumping around and other people, and like Sombras, etc. I'm not saying that you're bad. I'm just saying that with a little bit of time there, I think you'll improve that and be hitting shots on that. Like you might have hit the shots on that Genji due to a little bit more, I don't know, like maybe 20-30 minutes over a course of like 3 or 4 days. You might be able to start to see some improvements there depending on you. Alright, I mean 20-30 minute sessions over 4 different days.
In range of the objective. Form up on me.
Alright. During this fight, you can hear the Ash shooting over to the right.
In range of the objective.
I don't mind your target focus, but you could also have turned to the right and put just a slight amount of pressure on her so that she's not shooting on your team for free. Although your team does have this shield up and so she's not really doing all that much. Your target priority wasn't the worst, but I just remember thinking about how she's kind of just sitting there without much pressure on her. So I don't know, I was just throwing it out there as an alternative view on something you could be doing there in that moment. Alright, in this battle, I kind of wish you were using this a little bit more. Because you can climb over this structure to your right and shoot over the wall, and it's less predictable, and it's not as, I don't know, you wouldn't be in as much of a threat because you can kind of jump out at her. I mean, the less predictable part, but you have a lot different, more options and angles of approaches than that Widow would have too. All right, just something to add to your tools or your thought process on engaging them. Right there, your death was due because it was an awareness thing, so you didn't see the Widow, but she wasn't that far from where you're shooting, and she kind of did take a minute to jump out and line up her shot, so that was something you could have responded to a lot quicker. It must have been pretty focused on the Rhine or whatever, but anyways, we'll see what happens. Alright, so something else you can do here too is, like, especially with some characters that are just have small hitboxes, is you can close in on the range, basically, because Hanzo being projectile, he's at a disadvantage the farther away he gets. There's more he has to predict, and especially with like a tiny hitbox character that's a weirdo like Ash. So to improve your odds in these times, you know, you can just get up maybe half the distance there. You can do that, by the way, by maybe coming around the right hand side and moving over, or there's other ways you can do it, but that's one way you can increase your chances of landing a shot on her. Something I kind of wish you would do throughout this game is talk a bit too. Like, sometimes when there's some low targets, you would call them out, but in this case, I wish you would communicate about what main path the enemy's taking, and maybe some of the comp switches that you've seen. Just give them intel, because you have this high ground advantage, and you can.
I need healing. Ugh.
At that point, you didn't really need to jump down. You were at 190 health. He hadn't really done enough damage to you yet. You can spray him a bit with your secondary fire, or I mean, while not being so scoped in, and try to hit him up with your venom mime, etc. Put pressure on him and make him try to give up the high ground before you do. You have your whole team there; they can heal you. If you have to, if you get pressured enough, then you go down. Make him chase you. But you still had a chance to win that fight or to screw with him. So you gave up too soon, I think.
I'm ready to initiate self-destruct sequence. I've seen worse. You're going to live.
So you could have died there. To be honest, when you get low on health like that and it's a lost fight, unless you feel like you really can get a pick and give your team an advantage somehow, you should just back out and try to live. If the enemy team was just a little bit better, or maybe the respawns were just slightly different, by like maybe 2 or 3 seconds or something, you could have been dead there easy. Or yeah, if they just decided to push you a little bit more, you should have been. Okay, you're at that position because it's overtime and it's important for you to be shooting onto the point and getting picks, and you don't want the enemy team to hide from you, basically. However, you could probably just be on this high ground over here, like shooting onto the point from above the point. That means you have a little bit more time to be hidden from like the tracer and some of the other characters. That like the tracer would have to use more of her blinks to get to you because she doesn't do good going to high ground as much. At least it would take her a little bit more time and be a harder thing to do. So you might have lived a little bit longer if you did that. So some of my advice was, I don't know if it was nitpicky, but just take it as in I'm trying to give you advice not just for your current game, but in the larger context of your games in general. So some things that wouldn't matter so much in that scenario, like my advice at the end with the tracer. You guys probably would have lost either way. However, I'm just trying to give you a different set of things that you can choose from in a given moment, so that you don't have just like the one or two things that you're choosing, but maybe 3 or 4 different options to think about, and at times maybe give you just some better approaches in certain scenarios. All right. Also, your Hanzo wasn't bad. You could have stayed Hanzo. I guess you'd have to worry about the ferret to a degree, but at the same time, you weren't killing a ferret an awful lot, and she wasn't having as much of an impact as you were when you were on Hanzo.